Research Journeys, Making the Invisible Visual. In this paper, we critique the ways that we report on community-focused research in HCI and suggest how the pictorials format can facilitate transparency and support reflection on community spaces that bring them to life and support design processes. This paper sets out to make 4 specific contributions. Firstly, the typical text-heavy research paper often seen at HCI conferences, may not always be the ideal way to report on community-focused work. The current paper is published as a pictorial format, a paper composed primarily of images rather than text. We suggest that this pictorial publication format can provide scope to share aspects of our work that could otherwise remain unpublished and unexamined. Secondly, we discuss how researchers carrying out community-based research as outsiders only ever form partial perspectives of community spaces. Researchers' perspectives can be composed of the journeys that they make to, through, and away from community spaces. We suggest that sharing those journeys in visual format provides the researcher an opportunity to transparently share their partial perspective with readers and elicit other perspectives to inform the design process. Thirdly, we critique how the term "in the wild," often used as a blanket term for all community-focused outside the lab HCI research, can mask the unique ways in which researchers may engage with those communities. Much of our work is rendered invisible by current practices, so we seek to make the invisible visual and to bring to life contexts that the term "in the wild" can mask. We look to visually account for the social, cultural and material environments in which HCI projects are accomplished and to make what is often considered in the wild visible through imagery. Finally, we illustrate this argument through reporting of our research journey to a number of islands off the west coast of Ireland as part of a project that is developing technology to support rural community radio. In doing so, we wish to focus primarily on our third contribution, what we learn about in the wild context through visually representing our research journey to the reader and how this might support design. Next, we discuss our methodology before presenting some of our findings. The research journey reported in this paper was undertaken as part of a large EU-funded project focused on the evaluation of a novel technology intended to support communities in setting up and running FM radio stations in a cheap and accessible manner. The project is a collaboration between university researchers, commercial software developers, and community organisations in 3 remote locations on the periphery of Europe: in Romania, in Madeira in Portugal, and on islands off the west coast of Ireland. In each location, community radio stations are set up and run by community organisations in collaboration with the local population, and the technology is supplied by the project. As researchers, we are interested in understanding how the communities each engage with the technology, with questions such as whether the technology is useful in supporting the setting up and running of a radio station, the challenges with doing so, how to improve the technology, how to support governance of stations via software, and ultimately whether these activities support the communities in reaching their own self-declared goals. On one island that had already established a community radio station, our attention was to learn more about how the radio might support community needs and to increase participation. On another island, our intention was to explore initial ideas for the radio station that had not yet been established. We present our research journey as a series of themes, a visual archive to suggest forms of inquiry. There is something special in what images elicit for us as researchers, what they show and tell that words cannot, how they can assist in immersive reading of the accompanying text. We look to our research environment for rich visual experiences. In doing so, we work in a similar way to visual ethnography, with our primary focus on peripheral awareness of context and place. We therefore situate our imagery in between spaces in visual methods research in HCI. For our findings, we found 5 main themes: sense of place, transportation and transition, work and environment, supporting cast, artefacts and equipment. For the purposes of this presentation, we will focus on 2 main themes. The first is transportation and transition. Through our transitions on our research journey from the mainland to islands and ferries in West Cork, we learn from our visual experiences that there are questions we need to consider in design. For example, how do we design for seasonality? How do we not privilege one construction of the rural space over another? The fact that only other people on the ferry's evening crossing were 2 other researchers was telling for us. Did this suggest over-research of the rural island population we would be visiting? How can we engage this population if that is how they feel? We learn this through our research journey, through the transitions and transportation that we take. The second theme we call artifacts and equipment. Stumbling across images of the landscape inform us about the rural community in which we work and of the technology projects that came before us. On one island, an image of an abandoned wind turbine, described as an innovative and ahead of its time project, illustrates to us that it was not sustainable, as when the project and the funding related waned, the technology now lies unused. This image becomes a reminder to us of the importance of designing for sustainability from the beginning of our project. So now for our discussion. Through these images, we learn about the landscapes and temporalities of the rural locations we engage with, how the seasons impact place, the different meanings of place depending on positions. For example, whether you are a seasonal swimmer, a visiting researcher, an art student, or a resident farmer. How do we include those that have migrated from rural areas to contribute to the radio process? What specific materiality might influence project outcomes? How can technology support all of these various needs? We also notice active engagement when people are working on issues that matter to them together visually. We learn through the process that there is a tension between our desire to use images to increase research transparency and the level of comfort that rural residents have with research and being the subjects of research itself. When we conduct research in the wild, there are many ethical dimensions that must be considered. By taking you on our research journey in rural Ireland, we hope that those that inspire and host this work are exemplified and celebrated. Although our perspectives is not whole, this curated collection of photographs and sketches reveals the often hidden side of our collaborative work. Thank you.